Hey, Synaptic. Hey, that one guy. We're gonna get started here in just a minute. And I will apologize in advance if you hear the neighbor's dog barking. There's nothing I can do about it. Silence you. The dog was barking at me earlier. I don't think it liked the look of my telescope. All right. Oh, no, behind is just a random image. It's just a random image of stars that I took a while ago. I just thought it would make a nice background. I mean, if it's confusing, I could turn it off. I don't know, maybe that's better, less confusing. Okay, so this video, this webcast is mostly going to be an update about some housekeeping stuff with the channel. And this has been precipitated by a number of incidents, I guess. First one, let's talk about some of the links to spreadsheets and various other files that I've included in my video descriptions for years now. Unfortunately, most of those are about to break. I had used Drop Canvas as a hosting site for my files, and I paid for a premium account there where the files would be hosted permanently. Normally, Drop Canvas is a site similar to Dropbox, but a little more user-friendly, where you can click and drag files and host them on an auto-generated page. And normally those files expire after a set number of days. But if you pay for an account, they agreed to host your files for you permanently. And so that's what I did. I need to raise my volume? Okay. How's this? Is that better? Also bring the mic closer to me. Any better? Hopefully that's better. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. And it should be better now, hopefully. So, oh, I think a bird or a bat just flew over the moon there. It was out of focus. The moon, as you can see, is sharply in focus, so birds and bats flying relatively close to the telescope are going to be out of focus. So, as I was saying, Drop Canvas, right. was the site that I have used for years to host my spreadsheets and some other files for my page, not to be confused with Dropbox, which is much more popular. The problem for Drop Canvas is that because anyone could upload, at least for a temporary length of time, anyone could upload anything. People uploaded illegal content, and I mean probably really nasty stuff. And so Drop Canvas was constantly getting flagged by Google and other search pages as a harmful site because harmful files were being hosted there. And so the entire site would get blacklisted. And now the laws have changed, both in the EU and in the US, to put the onus on the content hoster to make sure that there's no illegal content. That balance of legal power is shifting. And so Drop Canvas can apparently no longer go on. It's shutting down. And so in a matter of days, all of those links to my spreadsheets and pictures and other things are about to break. When that site shuts down, all of my files will be deleted, and you will no longer be able to access them. Now, newer videos, I've been posting things like source code up on GitHub. That'll all still be okay. That's all going to be fine. And going forward, I'm trying to do more open source software development, doing things through GitHub instead of Drop Canvas. For pictures and things, I'll probably use Flickr, just because it's convenient. I tried using DeviantArt for a little while, but it's not as convenient as Flickr. But for some of my old videos, you'll find broken links, and I'm gonna do my best to re-upload some important files to to my Google Drive and share them that way. Things like calculation spreadsheets when they're needed. But I can't guarantee I can fix everything. There's so many files I've got up on Drop Canvas that it's just a monumental task to try to rehost all of that. I'd have to go through every file and provide a new link to it, to Google Drive or whatever, and I just don't have the time. Honestly, I do not have the time. So old files are about to become deprecated. So if there's any spreadsheets you want to download from any of my old videos, please do it now. Like I said, going forward, if I have to host spreadsheets and things, I'll do it through Google Drive or whatever. Okay, now point number 2. Back in February, after the Falcon Heavy launch, I applied for monetization on YouTube. As you know, my videos have not traditionally been monetized at all. Any video ads that occur before my videos are because I've used copyrighted music and YouTube's identified it and they've put ads on it. And that's fine. I understand that. I actually have permission to use Stellar Drone music from Stellar Drone. So anything there that's identified as Stellar Drone music, I can go back and contest that. That's not even really the reason they've made the decision they made, which is to deny me ad monetization. It wasn't even for copyright per se. It was for what they call duplication. And they don't make it terribly clear what that means. It could mean anything from you are duplicating copyrighted material that hasn't yet been claimed. So let's say you upload videos from other channels, upload videos from TV or whatever, and the content recognition system didn't catch it. When they go through their review process for determining who gets monetization, if they approve it, they may see something like that, and they may flag that channel and say, this channel is just duplicating other content, don't give it monetization. It could even mean, and according to people who are looking at the decisions that YouTube is making, looking at channels that have been denied and trying to figure out the reason why based on what's on those channels, in some cases, it's not even that. There's no content on these channels that has been created by anyone else. It's purely their own content, 100%. However, if the content is very similar between videos, they can deny it. So just the fact I'm streaming the moon right now, and I have previous videos streaming the moon, if I do this for hours on end, and I've done lengthy all-night streams, and I stream the same thing later, they could consider that duplicate content. If I take a launch video, and let's say I upload the raw, unedited footage, like I did for Falcon Heavy, and then later I upload a second video where I've enhanced the footage, so I have both versions available, so no one can accuse me of, manipulating the footage in some cheating way. I I have both versions available. And then later I do another video where I do an analysis of the Falcon Heavy footage. And then I do a video where I've released new software for stabilizing footage, and I release newly stabilized footage. I've done all these things. That's duplicate content, from what I can tell. From what other people are saying about other channels that have also been denied for the same reason, and it's just a form letter, it's just a copy-paste statement. Here's what we consider duplicate content. It seems like a lot of that is from channels that have their own content, but they're just sort of remixing their own content. And YouTube does have a big problem with this, especially, I don't know if you guys have heard the controversy about YouTube Kids. There's some questionable stuff, and I mean nasty stuff, that's up on that YouTube Kids version of the site that's supposed to be safe for kids. And some of that is been generated by AI algorithms, neural nets, that are looking at what is trending and trying to duplicate it. And they generate their own original content with these programs. And they just remix popular themes. And so what they basically end up doing is it feeds on itself, and it ends up generating videos that are actually not friendly for kids at all, but kids who don't know any better will click on it because it's shocking. Like Pepe the pig gets murdered, that kind of stuff. It's disgusting stuff. And so it's a remix. And you could say in that case, it's not the best example. Pepe the pig is I guess a trademarked character, whatever. But it's that kind of stuff. And so YouTube's clamping down on that, understandably. But what they've done is sort of create this blanket rule where you cannot monetize your videos if they are duplicates of each other. So they could actually consider what I'm doing right now duplicate content. They may or may not. But the problem is I could erase, all of the duplicated versions of my launch videos and only leave one copy up of each. And it still may not fix the problem. And I will have deleted all those videos for nothing. Or, even if I just set them to private, I don't know if they're really going to look into my account that deep and say, okay, well, we're still going to judge him based on that. And the problem is if they come back and they say no again, then I really don't know what to do. I'm having to second guess myself. Are they judging content that I've set to private because they know I can still make it public? That kind of thing. So it's a really difficult situation there. And I could erase the videos altogether just to be sure, but there's no guarantee that will work. So I'm not going to chase that horse. I'm just not. There's nothing to be gained by it, probably, and a lot to be lost if I delete 90% of my videos because they're very similar to each other and just try to conform to YouTube's will. But the problem is what I do is not entirely sustainable. I love going out and filming these launches, and I love, creating software and doing, lengthy streaming sessions like this, tracking asteroids and all of that. But it traditionally has not been free for me to do. If I go out and drive out in the middle of nowhere to film an asteroid going overhead, it costs me gas money at the very least, not to mention wear and tear on the telescope. And this scope's getting on up in years. I've had this scope now for 14 years. And there's going to come a day it breaks down. And I'm doing all I can to buy up replacement parts now. They don't make this scope anymore. They make similar scopes. But they don't make this particular model anymore. And so there are no replacement parts available. You have to go on the used market and find what you can. And hopefully what you find works. I just recently bought a replacement hand controller in case mine dies. It's getting on up there in age. The pads on it are completely worn off. It's going to die eventually, and it's not an easy part to find. So I bought a replacement one that seemed to be in mint condition. Looked like it had never even been touched. It still had the plastic on it, on the display. Three of the buttons do not work. Now I can still use this for parts, etc., but three of the buttons don't work. I mean, I can't just swap it out. And if I want to get another one, that's going to cost me more. So it's not a free hobby, and it's not even a cheap hobby. So like I said, it's not sustainable, and I'd hoped that I could start monetizing videos, because if I had had my Falcon Heavy video monetized, I would have made a decent amount of money on that, at least enough that I could start buying more replacement parts and sort of pay off the wear and tear on the telescope. But I can't do that. YouTube basically is not going to let me do that without fundamentally changing what this channel does. And so one step that I'm taking to solve this problem is, you may have noticed that my last webcast was not on this channel. It was on Red's Rhetoric's channel. And I uploaded the time-lapse of the asteroid pass on this channel afterwards. But the live webcast was on his channel. And that way, if people want to donate to support this content, they can do so. Red's channel is monetized. Red's Rhetoric, his channel is monetized, and any donations that are made, any ad revenue that is made from my videos being on his channel can come to me and can reimburse me for my costs. That's one step. Another step is I'm working, like I said, on open source software development, including the next version of my telescope tracking software, which I hope to port not only to Python, but also to ASCOM, so that a wider variety of telescopes can take advantage of it. And I think it's going to be really exciting. I think it's going to be really cool. The video stabilization software that I released was a step on that path, actually. That was testing that feature, testing a new method of doing video-based tracking to improve the accuracy of what that program will become. And you can use that to track rockets, or you can use that to track the space station. The idea is to make it very easy to do all of those things. And I think that's going to be a handy feature for a lot of amateur astronomers. I don't intend to charge for that software. There is commercial software out there that does a similar job for some telescopes, but it doesn't support my telescope, for example, which is why I had to go out and create my own. And it also is not free. If you want the video-based tracking capability, that's going to cost you. So I'm hoping that people will find it useful, and if they do, they can donate to support me in that. So there's going to be a way to donate to support the further development of that software once I release the next version. And that's going to be going up on GitHub as an open source program. So you can try it. There's no cost, there's no obligation, but if you like it and you want to support more development, you can. So I think that's a win-win for everybody. Unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. So after doing a live stream of that asteroid from I don't know what time to what time, but basically until the asteroid set on the trees, after doing that, I started getting some interesting comments, and I thought they were just, people being funny, saying I sounded like Red's Rhetoric. I come to find out today that actually, last night, there was a 2+ hour webcast on another channel that will not go, I will not name it, they will go unnamed, but they spent the time discussing how I am actually Red's Rhetoric, and I'm somehow altering my voice and fooling people, and that this is just me pretending to be nice. Red and I are friends, but we have very different personalities and different ways of approaching this kind of stuff. So, as you know, I keep everything PG on this channel. And I will do the same when I'm webcasting on his channel. He's kindly allowed me to share my footage on his channel, but I have a different approach in terms of style. And these guys claim that I'm just putting that on. And actually, I'm him, and now they've got him. They've wanted to see what his face looks like for a long time. Now they know it's actually my face. And they say if I want to prove I'm not him, then we need to both post a video showing our faces. So, to me, that's really disgusting. I do show my face on some of my videos. It's not something I'm hiding, but Red, for his safety and security, has elected not to show his face, and I respect that decision. And I'm not going to do anything to try to change his mind on that. And they can say whatever they want about me. I'm not going to do that to him. I'm not going to try to coerce him as they want me to. They've tried for a long time now, flat earthers and people like them, to get Red to show his face. Some of them refuse to debate him unless he shows his face, this kind of stuff, and it hasn't worked. And so now this is their new tactic. And honestly, I have trouble believing that they even believe what they're saying about him and me being the same person. We're obviously not the same people, and if you want proof of this, it's real easy. There was a launch we filmed a year ago, in August of 2017, the CRS-12 SpaceX mission, delivering cargo to the International Space Station. We were a few feet apart from each other, we both filmed the launch, but there's footage of me filming the launch, because like I said, I don't have any qualms about being on camera. And so most of the video, I'm under a blanket, because I've got myself covered in a blanket so I can see my computer screen, because I'm using my computer to do the tracking with the telescope. So you can see the telescope, you can see me covered in a blanket, and at the end of the video, I pop out from behind the blanket to shut off the camera, so you can plainly see it's me. Red filmed the same launch at the same time, but he did it manually, using his Nikon P900 on a tripod, manually tracking it. And he even had some issues on that launch with the tripod and the connection to the camera, and it started to come loose and kind of got wobbly, and he had to fix it, and he had to fiddle with it in real time. And so that footage is on his channel, you can check it out. And so, if we're the same person, how did I manage to do that in two places at once? Well, obviously I didn't. Obviously we're two different people. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out. So I have a very hard time, and these guys were going on and on about all these videos on my channel, comparing all the launches that we had both filmed. Well, yeah, we've filmed a lot of launches together. We're friends. I don't think there's any mystery or question about that. We've been friends for a while now. But there's hard proof in those videos that we're not the same person. So I have a very hard time believing that they even believe what they're saying, which means the only reason they're saying it is to try to manipulate me into manipulating Red to get what they want. Which is just unfortunate and sort of disgusting. Speaking of unfortunate, the moon is going into the trees right now. It's beautiful, isn't it? But in a minute, once it's really too dark to see, I will slew the telescope over to Mars, and we'll take a look at Mars. Mars is high in the south, well, relatively high in the south, and should be quite nice to look at tonight. So here's one of them now. Says, this is Red's voice. He plays the Fight Club meme page here, and Brad Pitt over on Red's Reddit channel. Yeah, I made a comment about that before I realized that you guys were actually serious. I said that as a joke. I said I'm the what did I say? I'm the Edward Norton to Red's Brad Pitt. It was a joke. I didn't know you guys were actually serious. I mean, that's a joke. It's pathetic. So I'm not willing to play host to these little fights and debates. I'm in some ways nicer than Red in that I don't use foul language, but unlike Red, I'm not willing to give you the time of day. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to click this button right here, and I'm going to hide you from my channel. Bye-bye. So that's how we deal with that. I'm done allowing people to abuse me like that for providing free footage for others. No good deed goes unpunished, right? And I feel I deserve a little more respect than that, so bye-bye, Limitless channel. You're done. It wasn't on Limitless's channel, but he was one of the people on the channel doing this debate, talking about me being Red's. So, he's gone. And if I see the other one, he'll be gone too. Oh, there he is. You're gone too. Bye-bye. I have no time for you. So, we don't have to hear from them anymore. That's nice. Thanks for both showing up so I can ban you from my channel. Makes it easier on me. Now I don't have to go into my page's settings and manually put in your names. Okay. So, let's move on to Mars, shall we? Give me a minute. I gotta slew the telescope. And I've only done a very rough and quick line, so it may or may not find Mars right away. There it is. Mars. Beautiful. Set it back to sidereal tracking. And then let's get the exposure down so we can actually see some detail here. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's quite pretty. Alright, I'm going to zoom in on it with a Barlow lens here. We'll put a 2x Barlow on this thing and zoom in on Mars. Oh, they think they can come back in. That's cute. Yeah, I don't think so. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. If they want to burn any more socks, I'm happy to oblige. So, yeah, getting back to future of this channel, you'll probably be seeing a lot less live streams on this channel and more on Reds. And that's simply because, like I said, YouTube's not letting me monetize this channel. So we'll just do things over there more often. But I wanted to have this video on this channel to talk about it, so anyone watching this channel can get the scoop on what's going on. And after this is over, I will put in the video description a link to Red's channel, so you can go check that out and subscribe there to stay tuned for future webcasts from my telescope. Hey, Sean Carroll, let me make you a mod. Can I do that from here? Yes. There you go. You got the wrench, buddy. So, Sean Carroll, if you could be so kind, if you see them come back in, you have my full permission to nuke them on site. Aha. So now I've put the Barlow lens on, but Mars is of course out of focus, which makes it look like a giant donut. Now I've put a mask on the telescope. To make it easier to focus. That's what they call Batnov mask. That's decent. The objective is to get the diffraction spikes to be symmetrical. It's hard to... I'm trying to view the screen upside down. That's okay. That's good there. That's not a bad view of Mars, I would say. There's some dust on the Barlow lens that makes for some spots. I'm going to try to put Mars in a spot where we can avoid the spots. And if anyone has any great advice for how to get dust out of a Barlow lens, I'm all ears. I haven't been able to get this stuff out for the life of me. I'm just going to adjust some of the brightness and contrast settings here. I get the feeling it's not quite as focused as it could be, even though with the mask it looked like it was. I'm just gonna tinker with it a bit. Yeah, that already looks a little better. Oh, Jeranism has decided to join us in the chat. I'm sure Nathan Oakley's told you a lot of things, Jeranism. I am not Red's Rhetoric. Personally, I feel revulsion at even uttering Nathan's name, given what he did on a live hangout, but we won't discuss that. Suffice it to say, I am not Red's Rhetoric. If you want proof, all you have to do is look at my footage of the launch of CRS-12 in August of 2017, and then look at Red's footage, and tell me how a man under a blanket controlling a computer could be manually tracking the launch with a P900 on a tripod. I was the person under the blanket. Red was the person manually following the launch with his P900 on a tripod. Good luck. No, I'm not using the Canon, actually. That's a great question. So for tonight, I am using the LX200. This is an 8-inch LX200. The camera is a Samsung SDC 435, modified for astronomy by removing the infrared blocking filter, and then mounted to the telescope. So the SDC 435 is basically just a security camera, but it has a very good chip on it for doing imaging of planets and the moon, and so it's sort of my main planetary imager. It doesn't have nearly as much resolution as, say, the Canon T5i, but it doesn't need to, because the planet, like Mars, is not going to occupy that many pixels. Now, if I want a whole image of the moon or the sun, then yes, I will use the Canon. But for looking at small things like Mars, it helps to have this camera. It does a really good job with objects that subtend a very small angle, like Mars. You can see the polar cap there very nicely. You can see some of the surface details and surface features. Mars came the closest this year that it's been to us since 2003, which was a record-setting year as well. I remember the 2003 apparition quite well. I was in college at the time and volunteering at our observatory. We had lines of people coming to see Mars going down the road, so much so that the police came to shut us down because we were starting to block up the main road a quarter mile down the road. So on the next nights we had to start handing out tickets and cut people off after that point, tell them to go home, because we had more people than we could handle. And we had telescopes all out through the yard in front of the observatory, the main observatory building, and we had the main telescope that, of course, everyone wanted to see through. So it was exciting, but very, very busy. Jupiter is too low for me to check out at this point, unfortunately, and it's not in the best position. I mean, it's not anywhere near opposition now, so we'll check that out next time. Sorry about that. I did a webcast with Jupiter not too long ago. I mean, a few months back, I think. I've been in the process of moving and buying a house, so I really haven't had as much time for astronomy as I might like, but now that I have my new place, I can potentially build a permanent observatory where I can do this kind of stuff a lot more. Again, it requires money, so we'll see what I'm able to do with help from Red with monetization on some of these videos, and also, of course, software development and trying to make donations off of that. I mean, ideally, it would be really cool if, I could leave this set up in a permanent observatory in the yard and then just come out on a clear night like tonight and just turn it on and start going. Start webcasting, start taking pictures, all the rest. That would be really cool. Getting there, though, is going to be a bit of a challenge. Thanks. So I'm just going to record a little video here offline without having to go through YouTube stream compression so that I can stack these images. Yeah, Patreon. Yeah, I've thought about doing something like Patreon. I kind of, and I don't know, maybe this is just me trying to be too creative, but I would very much like to focus it on not really just uploading videos. I want to provide content that is actually useful to people, like software, programs. So, sort of a Patreon, and maybe I could even set up a Patreon to do this, but Patreon for new software. So, when I upload a new little tool, like the one I just did recently, SDO image annotation. If I upload that or update that, then, that's when the Patreon kicks in. Something like that, where it's not just video uploads. I mean, I could stream like this kind of stuff all the time. It doesn't take all that much effort. But I want to provide stuff that is actually useful to people, that you can take it and use it in your own life, for your own purposes, and get utility out of it. And that's what I really like about doing software development now. It allows me to do that. I kind of was always angling towards that with developing spreadsheets and stuff, but I didn't really know programming all that well. So it's provided a nice opportunity for me to learn a new skill and also provide stuff that's useful to you, the viewer. What does the house look like? It looks nice. I'm willing to show my face, but I'm not so willing to show what my house looks like. Sorry. And I do live kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not really the middle of nowhere, but it's far enough away from major towns that I don't get much light pollution out here. It's nice and dark out here, really. I can easily see the Milky Way. That's not actually saying all that much. If you're really into amateur astronomy, you really want a site that, I mean, the Milky Way, that's not the criteria you're looking for. You're looking for the tiniest faint tendrils of being able to see the Milky Way. But for me, I've lived in urban locations for years that I've kind of gotten used to not being able to see the stars properly, and so it's really nice to be living in a place where I can just look up and see the Milky Way with ease. It's really, really nice. I mean, you go out to a place like the Chiefland Astronomy Village, which is up near Gainesville in Florida, and they've got pretty dark skies too. And I remember going out there the first time. It was in college, where we went out there for one of their annual star parties as a astronomy club, and I got lost with the stars. I mean, I thought I knew my constellations really well. And I generally do. I know them better now, of course, but back then I kind of thought I had a really good grasp on knowing my constellations just by looking, without having to refer to a star chart. I go out there the first night, I haven't a clue which star's which. There's so many of them that I'm completely lost in a sea of stars. And when I look up and I can't see the ground at all, it almost gives me vertigo. It feels like I'm going to fall off the planet, because it's just that breathtaking. If you ever have a chance, get out somewhere dark, whether it's a desert or just an area with a very low population, and clear a clearing that you can really see close to the horizon, and really take in the stars on a moonless night, especially if it's a time of year where the Milky Way is visible. It's spectacular. It will take your breath away if you've never seen it before. Star party at my house. Well, that's what I hope some of these webcasts are. It's like a star party at my house where I get to share it with all of you. Same scope you have? Control Delete. I love the 8-inch LX200. I got to play with a 10-inch a couple weeks ago at the Exos Aerospace launch, and I'll be uploading footage of that later as well. But they had a 10-inch LX200 for me to use with my software, and it was a great scope. But man, I became appreciative of having the 8-inch actually, because the 10-inch is a fair bit heavier, and I mean, I can lift it, but it's more of a deterrent. It's more friction of use. If I have to haul it out every night, yeah, it gets old after a while if it's real heavy, because it's like, do I really want to lift the scope? And after I hauled that one around for the weekend, I realized, I don't have it so bad. If I had a 10-inch, it'd be a lot heavier. And if I had a 12-inch, it'd be almost unmanageable. So, you get to a certain size telescope, and suddenly you it becomes mandatory to have a permanent observatory. You can't really transport it easily enough to get many nights of use out of it. Just adjusting the focus a bit. It's a very warm and muggy night, so there's a lot of thermal currents with the scope, and as the temperature of the tube changes, it causes the metal to change and throws out the focus a bit, so you have to keep refocusing it. That's why carbon fiber tube telescopes are really nice, but of course they're more expensive. Yeah, I don't know what all I'm going to show tonight. I don't have the setup to do deep space tonight, unfortunately. There's a screw that I'm missing for my counterweight system. I just need to go to the hardware store and buy a replacement, but I haven't had a chance to do that yet, so I can't hook up the deep space camera tonight. And really, this is probably it for the night. I'll just be webcasting Mars for a bit. Hopefully that's interesting enough for you guys. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Snooch. I enjoy doing deep space. It's my favorite, honestly. You probably, if you look, you may notice that the proportion of deep space to planetary webcasts I do, it's probably like 2 to 1 or something these days, because I do love deep space, even though it requires more effort to set up. Right now the scope's alt-az aligned. It's a real simple, easy alignment process, but it suffers from field rotation. For lunar planetary imaging, that's acceptable, it doesn't matter. But for deep space, you need really long exposures, and so field rotation becomes a problem because it blurs the images. So you have to polar align, which takes more time, takes more effort. The camera itself is much more complicated and requires a more delicate touch to operate. It also has a lot more parts to it, especially if I put the adaptive optics on there. So it becomes quite a process, but it's worth it. It's very much worth it. And you may be wondering, well, he has adaptive optics. Why isn't he using adaptive optics here? Here they wouldn't really help. For one thing, you need a guide star that you can guide on. I could do it, potentially. But you're locking onto a guide star to do the adaptive optics. Mars is actually orbiting the Sun, just like we are. We're moving relative to Mars over time. It's not going to blur single exposures. It's not fast enough to. But over time, it will drift through the view slowly. Be interesting to see how much that affects the view over time. The other issue, that's not really so much an issue. The other issue is that the deep space camera is not optimized for planetary imaging. The size of the pixels are really larger than what you want for planetary imaging. You want very fine resolution for planetary imaging, and even with the adaptive optics on there, I do not have as much fine resolution as I do with this camera, with the Barlow lens on. I can't put the Barlow lens on that camera, especially with the adaptive optics. So adaptive optics actually would not help here. It would actually result in a lower resolution image because it's not designed to go after planetary, where you're really wanting to get sub-arc second resolution down to the theoretical limit of the scope's resolution, which is about 0.56 arc seconds in this case. And to do that, you need very small pixels on the camera, or a Barlow lens, which is what I've got here. So it works better to do it this way, and then you can use what they call the lucky imaging technique, to get diffraction limited images, which is a way of saying you're at the scope's theoretical limit of resolution. You can't get more resolution out of it optically. It's impossible. Physics dictates it. And you do that by recording video and then loading that video into a program that analyzes it for the quality of each frame and picks the best frames and averages them together to average out the noise, the atmospheric turbulence. And you end up with a high resolution or high angular resolution picture. So that's how you do. You end up at the same goal. You end up at the same point. A professional observatory using adaptive optics beats the atmosphere by firing off a laser and using that laser to analyze the turbulence and compensate for it physically with the mirrors of the telescope. An amateur astronomer doing lucky imaging of a planet achieves the same goal much cheaper, much easier, by simply recording video and picking the best frames and averaging the best frames, so that the noise is averaged out, the turbulence is averaged out. Only the things that stay the same are left in the final image, and that's the signal, the actual features of the planet. So that's how you do that. Now, the problem there is that the limitation there is that you can't do that for deep space objects. You can do high-speed video with planets like this, where I'm recording the exposure is 1/60th of a second, and so it's a very fast exposure, and so it can beat the atmospheric turbulence. I can capture moments where the light is coming through the atmosphere clear. If you're recording images that have exposure times measured in minutes, you can't do that. The atmosphere has already blurred the image. So for that, you need active adaptive optics. And so there is actually a device you can buy as an amateur. It's not cheap, but you can buy a device that will provide some degree of adaptive optics. I have the AO7. They have newer models, but basically it's a tilt tip mirror that guides at very high speed on a guide star, and that prevents some of the wobble that the atmosphere causes, because it can move that tilt tip mirror much faster than the motors of the telescope. If you tried to do this with the motors of the telescope, they would take forever to catch up, because right now I'm pushing up and it's not moving up. It takes a moment for the gears to actually get out the slack, and now Mars is starting to go up. So let me reverse direction. Let me show you how long it takes. I'm pushing down, I'm pushing down, I'm pushing down. The motors are slowly taking out the slack, and then finally Mars starts to move. So you can't compensate for the atmosphere fast enough with the motors. You need another way of doing it, which is what the tilt tip mirrors of the AO7, that's what that provides. And so that's useful for deep space images, where you have to have an active system to compensate for the atmosphere. So Jason, you say you want a telescope that's easy to handle and cheap for your son. I would recommend a Dobsonian It's the thing I recommend every time, basically. If you want a cheap and easy handle scope, Dobsonian of some kind is probably going to be your best bet. You'll get the most bang for your buck. But before you even go that far, I would still be an old fuddy-duddy and recommend you learn how to identify the constellations and learn how to do some basic star hopping with binoculars and star charts. So learn how to identify and find the Orion Nebula, and when you've done that, learn how to identify and find the Andromeda Galaxy using binoculars and sky charts. And if you do that and you are enjoying it and you want to continue with it, then invest the money to buy a telescope. Because when you look through a telescope with your eye, you may be disappointed. You're not going to see the kinds of beautiful views that the camera sees, especially with deep space. With planets, you can kind of see some cool details. You'll be able to see the rings of Saturn, the ice cap on Mars, craters on the moon, all of that stuff. But when it comes to deep space, like the Andromeda Galaxy, you can see it, but it's not like it is in the pictures because your eye can't collect as much light as a camera. It instantly processes the light it receives. And so as a result of that, you only see the very brightest parts of deep space objects. You can see the core of the Andromeda Galaxy, but the outer reaches of the arms, you're really not going to see it. You're not going to see spiral structure. To see spiral structure, I think it was first spotted with the Whirlpool Galaxy, and it wasn't spotted until, I want to say, the 19th century. I should know my history of this a little better, but basically until we had really large reflecting telescopes, much bigger than what you're going to have on a budget. We couldn't even see spiral structure in galaxies, and so for a long time they were thought to just be another form of nebula, meaning a nebulous fuzzy object. So that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a lot of faint fuzzies. And with my scope, I can see some of the edge-on galaxies. I can tell they're edge-on. I can see that they're aligned. Scar Galaxy has some nice structure to it. But you don't see color, because your night vision doesn't have color. It's color blind. The cones of your eyes, the cone cells, provide color reception, but they're very insensitive to light compared to the rods that provide luminance. So you'll see light, you'll see fuzzy light from a nebula or a galaxy, but it won't look colorful. Even the stars, they'll look gray and pale for the most part. Some of the brighter stars you can see some color, especially when there's contrasting color. And I won't go too much into the grass here, but some of that is actually kind of interesting because the color that you see with your eyes is deceptive sometimes because of the contrast. Your eyes trick you. And so Albireo is a star in the constellation Cygnus. If you look at the pair in photographs, it's not quite the same color you see by eye. It's your eyes playing tricks on you. But there's some nice color there. But for the most part, you won't see much color. So it's disappointing to a lot of people. And this is why when I've done public outreach, when I've brought my telescope for people to see through the eyepiece and see some stuff, I've never had an issue when it's been for free. Like if I'm just volunteering my time providing views for people to look through the telescope, never had a problem. Never once. But when I was in college, I worked for a period of time at a public observatory where, people would buy tickets to come and see through the telescopes. And I remember one occasion in particular, but I'm pretty sure there was more than one, where we had an irate customer, ticked off, because they came to the observatory expecting to see Hubble Space Telescope kinds of pictures through the eyepiece. At the very least, they expected to see spiral galaxies and all this color and these beautiful red nebulas, and they look at a nebula and it looks gray. What? You tricked us. You tricked us with those fake photos of yours. Well, many times those photos are actually true color. Hubble pictures are often narrowband, particular spectrums of light. They're not what your eye would see in terms of color. But a lot of pictures of nebulas, especially taken by amateurs like me, it's true color. The camera that I'm using right now, it's a one-shot color camera. It's got filters, red, green, and blue filters on the pixel to differentiate color. The only thing is it's sensitive to infrared light that our eyes are not sensitive to, so it can actually see beyond human vision. But it's basically the color that you would see if you looked in the eyepiece. But your eyes don't normally see that color in deep space objects because you're colorblind to very dim light like that. So guy comes to the observatory, he expects to see these beautiful nebulas, he feels he's been duped, and he wants his money back. And I've just had to deal with issues like that when I was in college, and never again, would not do that again. People have different expectations, even if they don't consciously think about it, they do. They have different expectations when they're paying money for a product and expecting to see something versus when it's being offered for free. I mean, I'm probably stating the obvious here, but it's true, and I've seen that in action. So, what I'm saying is, before you invest money in a telescope, make sure you know what you're getting into, and make sure that what you're going to get out of it is going to satisfy you. And using binoculars, you can see some of the brighter deep space objects like the Orion Nebula and the Andromeda Galaxy, and they'll look very nice, very comparable to what you're going to see in a telescope. The telescope will collect more light, potentially, depending on its size, more resolution, so you can see the rings of Saturn real easily, you can see the Great Red Spot, but it's not going to make it colorful. And so, if you think you'll be happy with what you're going to get out of the binoculars, and imagine that, scaled up a bit, then I would recommend moving on, buying a Dobsonian. Maybe a 6-inch Dobsonian would be a good starting point once you've mastered some sky charts and binoculars. That's kind of how I did it. I did have a small refractor, one of these long tube refractors like you used to see at the store a lot when I was in middle school, and I did see the rings of Saturn through that, which was cool, and I saw some of the cloud bands on Jupiter, which was cool. But when it came to deep space, it couldn't perform, and the mount was wobbly. I was constantly fighting with it to try to keep it in focus and keep objects in the view. It was just it was a rickety old thing. The Dobsonian, I didn't have a Dobsonian, I had a Newtonian, which is the same type of telescope tube on a different mount. It was like an old Criterion Dynascope, for any amateurs watching old schools who know what that is. It was a Meade knockoff of a Criterion Dynascope. Really good scope. 6-inch, showed me a lot. Saw a lot of galaxies, a lot of nebulae. Like I said, no color, but I enjoyed it. And so that's where I recommend you start, looking at binoculars, sky charts, and if you like what you see, look at maybe Orion telescopes. They've got some nice Dobsonians. I think Skywatcher's got some. I haven't tried any Skywatcher scopes. I've used some Orion Dobsonians, and they were good. You want something that's got a nice smooth action on the focuser. A red dot finder, those are getting popular. Those are nice. I think I still prefer a good viewfinder, but viewfinders require a little more practice to use. Viewfinders are miniature telescopes that sit on top of your telescope that help you find objects, and they have crosshairs in them, and you have to learn how to adjust those crosshairs to be in line with the telescope. You have to adjust usually 3 set screws to try to get it in alignment. A good quality viewfinder has 6 set screws. I've had some that only had 3. They're pretty terrible, honestly. But no, you want one that's got, if you're going to get a viewfinder, get one with a good set of 6 set screws to adjust to get it aligned. But that takes some skill and some practice, and it wasn't something I was good at right away. And so it's really frustrating when you're starting out and you're trying to find something. The viewfinder's not even aligned, and you got to find something to align the viewfinder. So it's helpful to align it during the day. Is what I would recommend. Take it out during the day, align it on a distant telephone pole, learn how to use the viewfinder and get it aligned, and then do it that way. Because at night, it's difficult to get something in the telescope when you're starting out and you don't have an aligned viewfinder. Which is why red dots are popular. Red dots are basically similar to holographic sights. Like they project a red dot that looks like it's out in infinity, using a laser, usually reflecting off a piece of glass. Those are useful, but they don't magnify the image, and so it can make it tricky to find some deep space objects in obscure locations, or if there aren't any bright enough stars to see. So, yeah, binos first, and then, yeah, if you have a spyglass, that works if your budget's limited. But even like just a simple pair of 10 by 50 binoculars from Bushnell or something would be good. And then go on from there if you like what you see. Is it an upside down image? Probably. I don't think I've got it inverting the right way. I can invert it if you prefer. The telescope's got a star diagonal on it that will tend to invert the image, and I don't think I've got the camera set to correct for that. There is a way with this camera actually that I can correct for that, but I don't think I've set it that way right now. Yeah, it looks like it is an inverted image. I can invert it. I'm gonna do that. I just want to try to remember to change this and turn it off when I'm done. Image adjust, vertical, flip on, hooray. Okay. Now it's right side up. It's going to be a little confusing at first because now my controls are going to be reversed. But, yeah. It's the so this CCD camera is, for those just joining, it's a Samsung SDC 435 security camera, and they make a similar one now. They've changed the name of it, but it's the same thing. It's just a different label. I think it's like the SCB 2000, I want to say. It's cheap. You should be able to pick one up for about $100, and it's great for planetary imaging, and it can do some limited deep space. Actually, it's quite sensitive if you crank up the exposure time on it. It's noisy, but it's sensitive. You can easily see color and stuff in some of the brighter nebulas, like the Orion Nebula with this camera. It's a good starter camera to get into. It's good for what they call video astronomy, where you do video-assisted astronomy. And so this is what a lot of us who really want color in our images and stuff will do, is if we just want to do casual viewing, we'll put a sensitive video camera on the telescope and do it that way. So there's no image processing that you have to do, where you process the data to convert it from FITS files to JPEG and all the rest. It's just right there, instant video. It has the disadvantage, though, that it is only standard definition. It's an SD video camera with an RCA out. That's all it is. And I've got a video capture card on the laptop that's capturing that video. But like I said, it's very good, very sharp for lunar and planetary imaging, and also if you do satellite tracking like I do, it's useful for that too, because again, it's both sensitive and also provides good views of bright things like the space station. So in terms of the CCD cameras, the one I recommend for the LX200, if you want to do deep space, I have the SBIG ST2000. Sorry, I had a SCB stuck in my head. The ST2000 XCM. You could also go with the XM model. That's the grayscale image model. I have the XCM model, which is the single-shot color model. Most people in serious deep space astrophotography would say that's for noobs. That's for newbies, because it's got the filters built in, so you can't really do narrowband imaging all that well with it. It does true color, but you can't really use your own filters. You can, of course, add or subtract an infrared blocking filter or an infrared pass filter, things like that. But the thing I like about it is because it is single-shot color, it's really good for live streams. It's really good for, public outreach and things. The thing about it that's so good for the LX200, so the LX200 is a good telescope. It used to be, sort of top of the line for amateurs, at least in terms of looking in the magazines and stuff. If you were your average consumer, this was top of the line luxury telescope back in its day. But its mount is not perfect. It does have periodic error. It drifts. Even if you have it perfectly polar aligned, it will drift back and forth due to wobble in the gears. So you want to be able to auto-guide. The thing about auto-guiding is it has its own pitfalls. If you auto-guide with a guide scope mounted on top of your telescope, you can get flexure, where the tube flexes. And that sounds like, well, why would that even, I mean, it's got to be microscopic. Why would that matter? Well, you're looking here right now at an image where each pixel corresponds to less than 1 arc second. 1 arc second is 1/3600th of a degree. And with this camera, the ST2000, if I don't use a focal reducer, I will have generally a little less than an arc second per pixel. So it's very sensitive to flexure, anything that's going to cause the guiding to go off. And that will give you headaches till the sun comes up. It will. I've been there, I've done that. I used to use my Canon, an SLR camera, as my deep space imager and tried to auto guide with a guide scope. And I kept running into flexure issues and all this stuff. It was a nightmare. The other thing about it is it's a thermoelectrically cooled, so it can hold a set temperature. And so it can chill the CCD down to reduce the noise and hold a set temperature so your dark frames are matched to the actual image frames in terms of the temperature of the camera. And that helps too. In terms of guiding, the older S-Big cameras, and I guess the new ones have it too, but I don't know as much about the newer ones. The ST cameras have these guide chips that sit next to the imaging chips. And that is big because it means you're guiding through the main telescope. There is no flexure possible because what the guide chip is seeing is coming from the same telescope as what the imaging chip is seeing. So there's no flexure possible and you get much better guiding. And so immediately that made my imaging better. So the ST2000, best purchase I've ever made, next to the telescope. Best purchase I've ever made. If you can find one on the used market, get it. They can be had for relatively cheap. I bought mine no more than most people would pay for an SLR camera new. So get one if you have an LX200. I would also recommend a focal reducer with that though. So I have a 0.63 focal reducer, and if I'm not using the adaptive optics unit, I need to use the focal reducer to make it a little more forgiving, because otherwise the autoguider is fighting the mount, and it's tricky. You kind of have to play with the settings a little bit when you're first starting out with it to figure out what's right in terms of the aggressiveness of it, trying to correct for guiding errors with the telescope. But you can do it. It's doable. The adaptive optics unit is the next thing I would recommend. So I have the AO7. It adds complexity in terms of setting it up. It requires you to physically attach the unit, some screws and stuff. But when you get it on there, man, that thing is just killer. It can just go to town. Just go to town. Because it will lock onto these guide stars and guide with a tilt tip mirror, and you will never have another trailed image ever again. You'll never have streaks. The only problems you'll have is the optics itself at that point. I mean, you're just limited by the optics at that point, where, you know, this is a traditional Schmidt-Cassegrain. It doesn't have a perfectly flat field out to the edges. So you'll get some focusing issues, some coma in the stars at the edge of the field of view. But, you know, it's pretty darn good. You're basically getting max performance out of the scope at that point. So, ST2000 XCM with the AO7, it's been a great combo for me. The only thing about it is you have to plan a little bit better. You can't just randomly point at an object and say, go. You need to look at your planetarium software. I use Sky Safari Pro on my phone and my tablet. They have a sale on it right now. Snatch it up now if you can. It's 50% off right now for Sky Safari Pro. They're not paying me to say that. I'm not getting kickbacks, I swear. But highly recommend. It's as powerful as most desktop planetarium programs, and it's really convenient to have it on your phone or your tablet. And you can set it up with, you can set most good planetarium programs up with presets for the field of view of your telescope and your camera, and you want to do that with the AO7, definitely. You want to set presets for what the field of view of the camera is going to be and where this guide scope, or sorry, the guide chip is going to be looking, because you're looking at a very tiny piece of the sky when you're not using the focal reducer. And with the adaptive optics, you can image without the focal reducer and get higher resolution images. But like I said, you need to have a good guide star, and it needs to be fairly bright in the guide chip for the adaptive optics unit to work. You generally want something that's magnitude 12, no dimmer. And so you're going to have to rotate the camera to find one. And the adaptive optics unit is designed for this. It's what they got. It's got something they call the captain's wheel, where it looks like a captain's wheel off a pirate ship, and you unscrew it a little bit, and then you can rotate the camera without risking the camera coming off. It's still on there tight, but it's kind of got this mount where you can unthread it a little bit and rotate the camera to get it at the orientation you want. So you can find out how you're going to need to rotate the camera to get a guide star in. So you don't have to guess. You don't have to keep hunting. You can know ahead of time going in, here's the angle the camera needs to be at to get that guide star in there. And boom, you've got it. And then you just go to town on it. Start auto-guiding with the adaptive optics unit, and it'll operate it up to, like, I don't know, 40 hertz or something. I've never run it that fast, but you know, even if you're at like 10 hertz, 10 corrections per second, you're in heaven. So those are my recommendations. Oh, thanks, Chris Astro Channel. Yeah, Mars is looking really great tonight. If you're just joining, I don't know. I reset the stream just now by accident. That's my fault. I don't know if... Oh, it looks like it still might be at the same link. Okay, I think it's still running at the old link. Thank goodness. I meant to hit start recording on an offline video here on OBS, and I accidentally hit stop streaming instead. Dangerous having those buttons right next to each other. Yeah, Mars looked better a month ago. It did. I didn't have much time to see it then because, like I said, I'm in the process of moving into this house, so haven't had a whole lot of time for astronomy. Also, the weather has been, you know, typical summer in Florida, very rainy, so it's rare that I get a clear weekend like this. But still, we can see a lot of detail still with Mars. You can see the polar cap real well. You can see some surface feature detail real well. Tweaking the focus a little bit here. Trying to make sure it's at its maximum sharpness. And also, I mean, although it was closer and brighter and maybe better a month ago, Mars has been under dust storms lately, which can sort of blur the details. And those dust storms have been real trouble for the Opportunity rover. So let me see what the latest is with that, because they have not really been hearing from the rover since it's had to hunker down for this dust storm. So yeah, 3 days ago, there's this article on space.com that the dust storm is settling down now, so that's why we're seeing good details on the surface right now. Mars can have global dust storms. They cover the whole planet, basically. And that's what was going on. It was real dense enough that it was obscuring the sunlight and basically killed the power for the Opportunity rover, which relies on sunlight for its solar cells. So it's lessened up now to where the sun should be coming back in strong enough to revive the rover. But they're only going to give it 45 days to wake up and start talking before they're going to declare it dead, basically. So they say in this article, if they have not yet made contact when those 45 days have ended, NASA will have to determine how to proceed. In a statement released August 30th, the agency said it would continue to listen passively for the rover until the end of January. But for 45 days, they're going to make real active efforts, basically, to contact the rover and try to find out if it's still alive, basically. But it's possible that this dust storm has actually killed the Opportunity rover. I hate to say it. The Mars exploration rovers have been on the planet since about 2004, I think. So about 14 years, about the same age as this telescope, actually. Man, that's kind of nostalgic, I guess. And I guess it's going to be kind of sad if my telescope ends up outliving the rovers, but that should be expected. I mean, the amazing thing, those things were only designed to last a few months, and they've gone for years. So hopefully Opportunity wakes back up and phones home, but if not, we still have the Curiosity rover going down there, and that's radioisotope thermal generator powered, so it's not relying on solar panels. Murav Herschel says, I sure have a lot of inside info from NASA. Do they employ me? No, they don't employ me. I noticed in the Hangout discussing me, claiming that I'm the same person as Red, they really sort of focused in on at one point my participation in a NASA social for CRS-8. Noticing how close I was to the rocket. Yeah, I was real close to that rocket. That was really cool. But no, I've never worked for NASA, and I don't work for NASA. That was what they call a NASA social. A NASA social is an opportunity that NASA makes available to anyone on social media to apply to come see events up close behind the scenes at NASA. It could be launch, it could be stuff at Mission Control in Houston. They've done NASA socials out there, and even Thor News went to one of those. I don't know if any of you watching know who that is, but he's been a critic of NASA a lot, and so they let him come out and see Mission Control up close behind the scenes in Houston. And so I got to participate in the NASA social for CRS-8, which was just an incredible experience. Not only because I got to see the rocket up close and all the rest, but it was a historic launch. That was the first time SpaceX successfully landed their Falcon 9 on the drone ship out in the Atlantic. And I was there that day. And after the launch, I had the opportunity to see the debriefing, or the press briefing, in person. I was sitting in the room with Elon Musk giving the press briefing after that launch. In fact, because the room was completely packed and filled up, they shuffled us in from the NASA social in at the last second, which was, really nice of them to even let us do that. And so there were no seats left, so they actually had me sit on the floor. My head's just out of the camera view. I'm on the floor right in front of the desk where Elon Musk is giving the press briefing. Just incredible experience. But no, I didn't get paid one dime for that. In fact, they made sure to let us know, if you're applying for this, we're not flying you out here, and we're not putting you up in a room. You're paying for all of this yourself. We're not even going to buy you lunch. You're buying your own lunch. But if you want to, you can apply using your NASA or your social account, whatever it is. It could be Twitter, YouTube, whatever. So I applied with my YouTube channel and got accepted, and got to go out there for that. And you can see those videos on my channel. Just an incredible experience, and like I said, historic launch at that. Where am I located? Florida. So I live a couple hours from the Cape. So it's feasible for me to drive out there and film these launches. Not all the time. I know Red goes a lot more often to these launches than I do. In fact, he rubs in. He enjoys that. But I try to make it out there when I can. Especially if it's a weekend launch, I'll try to get out there for that. I know I wasn't out there for this last SpaceX launch. What was their last one? Man, they've done so many now this year. But this last one, they had a night launch. I think it got pushed to Sunday night, Monday morning. So I theoretically could have done that and driven straight to work. I've done that before, but at that point it's like, it's so much driving. I'll do that if they're landing at LZ1, you know, back at the Cape where they're landing on land and you can really see it. That's an incredible experience. But if they're just landing out on the drone ship or whatever, I'll stay home, thanks. I guess I've gotten back to the state where I'm taking certain things for granted again. I shouldn't do that. I didn't used to go out to all these launches. I would watch them from the yard, but I used to live right there at the Space Center. I grew up just a few miles away from the Space Center, so I saw most of the shuttle launches in person. And growing up, shuttle launches were happening all the time. I saw Challenger explode from my front lawn. And even after that, you know, they started flying again and took it for granted. It started to become normal again. It started to become routine. It's just something America does. You know, we launch space shuttles. But after Columbia, I realized, well, they're going to cancel the program here. This isn't necessarily going to keep happening forever. We're not necessarily going to keep launching people into space from America. And so I started trying to make the most of it and started taking the telescope down to photograph the launches and even one of the landings. And back then I didn't have video on my SLR. It was just a still shot camera, but I took still frames and put up slideshows and stuff, put them up on Flickr and whatnot of some of these final shuttle launches. And then after that, sometime later, after the shuttle program wound down, I ended up upgrading to the Canon T5i, which has video, and started trying to record some of the SpaceX launches with video by manually moving the telescope to keep up with the launch. And for this, I'm having to drive out to the Cape and whatnot. But in the back of my mind, for some years, I'd had the idea that it might be possible to write software to enable joystick-based tracking of the telescope. The telescope has preset slew speeds. It can move at fixed, discrete velocities, where you can tell it move really fast, move a little less fast, move slow, move really slow. It's got like, what, 4, see, slew, find, center, guide. Yeah, 4 speeds. And that's all it can do. And so if you're trying to track an object that is smoothly increasing or decreasing velocity, it's tricky. There is a program that had been available for years for tracking the space station, but it can't track just random objects flying through the sky like rockets. It can only track based on a known orbit. So, but I realized, well, if you could do that, then there's got to be a way to get it to work with a joystick or something. And I had the idea of how to do it, sort of, but I never really executed on it until shortly after the first SpaceX failure, CRS-7, where it blew up during launch. And so on that one I filmed it, but I was still moving it by hand. And again, I had this idea in my head, well, I could probably write a program that would fix this, that would do it with the joystick. And I knew already at that point, before that explosion happened actually, that eventually SpaceX was going to start trying to land these things. And they were going to come back to land and land these things. I mean, just wild, you know? And I knew that was going to be historic, and I wanted to capture it in good detail, so I started writing this program. And that became the telescope tracking program that I now use to film these launches and these landings. But, yeah, it requires me driving a few hours out there now and back. So it's significant investment and process to do it. Unfortunately, I don't live as close to it as I used to, but I grew up there. It's kind of how I got infected by love of astronomy, love of space flight. Used to be that the visitor center out there was free. You could just go out there whenever you wanted to, because NASA, I believe, they ran it technically, and then they handed it off some years ago to a private company to manage because it was just a money hole for them. And so now Delaware North runs the visitor center, so it's not so free to go, but it's still a nice experience. And they got a bus tour and all the rest. But yeah, growing up there, I grew up around that stuff, and even before 9/11, on the weekends, you could occasionally go out to the Air Force Station, actually, and see where the very first rocket launches occurred. The old blockhouse where they used to fire off the Redstone rockets that launched Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom on the first Mercury flights. And you could see those control panels that they used to launch Explorer 1 or these various Redstone rockets. And you could be right there with the controls and everything. It was free, and it was open to the public. And then 9/11 happened, and they shut that down. You can still go on that tour now, but you have to go through the visitor center and pay extra money to do it. And they don't give you nearly the freedom they did before, where you could just spend all day there. Now they rush you through there real quick and get you out, because they have to escort you the entire way. There has to be a tour guide who is watching you the whole time. You can't just free roam the grounds unguided now. They kind of they give you a few minutes to explore, but then they rush you back to the buses. So it's not like it used to be. But growing up as a kid, it was, like I said, I took it for granted, and now I realize what I had, And so I try to document some of these things, especially like the SpaceX accomplishments of rocket reuse, because eventually that's going to become the standard, that rockets aren't just disposed of, they're reused, and spaceflight is made more affordable and sustainable and accessible that way. But right now we're at the threshold of all that, and so just like with the first Mercury flights, kids and people are going to look back at what's happening today for inspiration and to remember the history of how it all started. So, sorry, gotta ban somebody else. So yeah. Oh, PayPal link. Yeah, so I do have a PayPal, private, I guess you'd say anonymous PayPal, that I'm setting up so that people can donate for, development of my software and whatnot. I haven't made that public yet because I felt like I wanted to wait until I release the next version of my telescope tracking stuff, because I feel like that's what's really useful to people and of value. But let me go ahead. Let me see if I can find the link here. Sorry, I'm just looking for this link. I think somebody wants to donate, so I'll go ahead and post a link in the chat here for my PayPal. Yeah, the no flag. So, yeah, First Man is a movie that's supposed to be based on the authorized biography of Neil Armstrong, and apparently they omitted the American flag being planted on the moon for reasons. I'm not happy about that either. Honestly, I may not see the movie for that. And it's really unfortunate, because I was looking forward to seeing that movie before I heard about that. I was really looking forward to that one. Why no flag? Well, so the creators of the movie apparently felt that it was a human accomplishment, not an American accomplishment, and they really wanted to not make it about the U.S. So they omitted the flag. I'm sorry. No. That was a United States accomplishment. Yes, it was also a human accomplishment, but we were the ones that did that, so it's not even historically accurate to, I mean, it's just crazy to admit that. It's just nuts. Alright, so let's see. Here's the donation button thingy. Donation. We'll call this Astronomy Live. Okay, here we go. Donation button link. Feel no obligation, but for anyone who wants to support further webcasts, further software development, that is the link. And I will be, posting more about that when I get to the stage of actually releasing the next version of my telescope tracking software. And I thank you all for your support. I'm sorry, hang on a second here. You're going to hear a little more typing. I'm going to save that link so I have it in the future so I don't have to hunt for it again. Yeah, feel no obligation to donate, and if you can't, I totally understand, and that's fine. There was somebody in the chat who I think wanted to send me a donation, so there's the link. And again, I thank you so much, for your support, even if you can't donate anything. Is it possible to focus on the moons of Mars? That's a great question. Actually, it might be, but we'll have to overexpose Mars to do it. And even then, it's tricky. Very tricky. Phobos and Deimos. Phobos is very close to Mars to the point that Mars would probably glare it out. Deimos is a little further away, but it's magnitude 13.6. Really tricky. Let's give it a shot. Let's just see what happens. Couldn't hurt. Okay. Now, that is one very, very overexposed Mars. Let me first resync it on Mars in case I have to go back with the go-to. So I can do that. Oh, this way, the other way. I'm going to try to go down towards to where Deimos is, thereabouts. See if we can pick anything up. Okay. Crank up the exposure some more. Yeah, I haven't found Nibiru. Up a little bit. Okay, maybe too much. Yeah, I don't see Deimos. I don't really see it. Might be something that really does require the deep space camera, which, as I said, I can't really do tonight on account of not being able to attach the counterweight system. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see here. Yeah, just getting some lens flare stuff going on there. And Mars is really bright. So that makes things tricky as well. Just for fun, I'm going to go to my camera's maximum exposure setting. I'm going to pan over to the left one more time. Deimos should be to the left of Mars. But I'm not... Yeah. I'm not really seeing any definitive sign of it for sure. Yeah, okay. We'll go back to Mars. Sorry, gang. We tried. It could just be that the moons are too close to Mars right now. I mean, if you really want to aim for them when they are as far from Mars as they can get. And obviously, we're just randomly looking right now. Oh, what's this? What's this? Oh. Underexposed Mars. Okay. Oh, what am I thinking? It needs to be there. It needs to be there. Alright. There we go. Back on track. Alright, snooch. Checking now. Wow. Thank you guys. Wow. Appreciate that. That's very nice. I can't thank you guys enough. I've got 2 donations. I don't want to say names here, but Snooch was one of them, and I don't know who's the other. I think the other's probably in the chat too, but thank you, both of you. That was very nice, and that will go towards equipment costs for sure. Yeah, Snooch, I just saw that. Thank you very much. That was very nice, and I appreciate that. So that will help defray equipment costs and everything else, so thank you. And I hope you find the programs I release useful. I really do. Can I point to geostationary satellites? Yes, I can. That might not be a bad idea. It might not be a bad idea. Let me break out the computer control cable to hook up the scope to the computer, so that I can do that. And let me bring up my satellite tracking software here. Ultimately, this will be my own software, but I'm in the middle of transitioning my software to Python, so I'm just going to use Brent Beauchart's program for tonight. Oh, thank you, Dazza. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's not a bad image of Mars tonight. I'm quite happy with it. Before we go off of Mars, actually, let me get one more recorded video here. I think I already got it at its best when it was at the meridian earlier. It's now a little lower in the sky, and so it's going to be looking through more atmosphere. But it's still not a bad image. Okay, reconnection successful. Sorry about that. I am tempted to try to do something to fix that. It might interrupt the stream in the process of my attempted fix. I think it'll be okay. Let me go try something. I'll be right back. So I just had a random disconnection from YouTube there. I think, like I said, I think I might have a fix for it. Hang on. We still running here? We're still running. Okay, good. Let me plug this boy in and see what we got. this should physically tether the laptop. But nope, still working. Okay. Unfortunately, let me try. I'm gonna have to rearrange plugs here. Bear with me. The camera's gonna go off for a second and come back. There we go. That's better. Okay. Power that on. Alright, now hopefully this will connect to the network. Alright. So we should be hardwired. Yay! Okay. That should improve the streaming quality. It shouldn't drop out now, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood. It should stay stable. Okay, so, right. Geostationary satellites. Let's work on getting that going. So let's connect the scope to the computer. I need to download the orbital elements for the geostationary sats. I haven't done that in a while. And actually, you know what might be fun? I don't know if it's visible right now. It might be too low. It might be fun to try to get the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Saturn too low for me? Probably. Let's see. Where is it at right now? Yeah. Yeah, it's way too low, unfortunately. Well, I won't say way, but it is entering the trees at this point. The way I look at it, though, is that Saturn is available more frequently than Mars is, and I haven't seen Mars in quite a while, so I wanted to make tonight Mars-focused, sacrificing Saturn in the process. Alright, let's see here. Okay. So, the wires are all connected. Let me, let's see, what port are we on? We're on COM 5. Okay. So connect to the scope. Connection's good. Alright, before we move on towards SDO, which I think I'm just going to do that one to start with. We'll work on others later. But we'll get going on SDO if I can. Okay, southwest. Yeah, we should be able to get SDO, no problem. Let me refocus the telescope. So I'm going to take the Barlow off now and go for a wide view to get SDO. And just a warning, you're going to hear some very loud squeaky noises because I'm going to thread a focal reducer onto the camera, and it's going to be noisy, unfortunately. Actually, I'm going to need a different nose piece for this. Whoa. What's going on there? I thought it was. Oh, what the heck? Okay, so that doesn't... Alright. So I had to go to get a different nose piece that's really works better with this focal reducer. I think that's how I normally do it. We'll find out. It's been a while since I've done this. Okay, so with this camera anyway. So enjoy your last view of Mars here, your last good view. We're about to take it off. There we go. So now I got to refocus with the focal reducer. This reduces the effective magnification of the image quite a lot. With satellites like SDO, there's no way we can possibly zoom in enough to see any detail on them. It's not like the space station where I can see all the structural detail because it's a low Earth orbit satellite. Geostationary and geosynchronous satellites are much too far away for that. So instead, what we want to do is we want to go for low magnification, maximum light gathering capability. That's what we're going to do here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. There we go. That's reasonably... focused. Okay, well, yeah. That's what I was afraid of. I did this wrong. I've got the focal reducer misconfigured. Hey, look, Mars is Nibiru. What do you know? We'll fix that. I think I know what I did wrong. Again, sorry about the squeaky noises. Let's try this again. Ah, there we go. So the name of the game is to get those diffraction spikes symmetrical, like that. And though it's hard to see, that actually is Mars. Very, very zoomed out. All right. So now, I think we're ready. I think we're ready to move on to the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Let's see. Oh. It's at 52 degrees. I had my time zone set wrong there on the scope software. So we're at 52, almost 53 degrees elevation on SDO. That's good. Alright. Let's start tracking. And I will silence that beeping momentarily. Let's adjust the brightness and contrast settings here. I might be clipping things a little too much. For maximum exposure. Ah, there it is. I think. I'm overexposing here a bit, but I see it now. It's up near the top of the view. Alright. Let's dampen that brightness down a little bit, shall we? There we go. That's better. And the focus is looking pretty terrible, to be honest. just going to tweak it here, see if I can tweak it into submission. Of course, part of the other problem is this is not a high-def camera. This is a standard definition camera being blown up. I do have a, HD deep space camera, but can't use it right now. Oh, that's better. That's much better focus now. Okay, so let me try to adjust the position. To center it up a little better. So the stars are streaking by, and I'm centering it up on SDO now. Maybe not quite that much adjustment. Yeah, let's just move it up a little bit. It's near the center of the view. It's this kind of squiggly thing near the center of the view because I'm adjusting the pointing a little bit here, so it's going to squiggle a bit as I move it around. Okay, so now SDO is this bright spot in the center. I'm going to try again to adjust brightness and contrast a little bit. There's hot pixels all over the image. Those are those other white stationary spots. But SDO is the brighter white stationary spot in the center. And that is the Solar Dynamics Observatory. So let's see here, what time is it right now? I'm going to start a recording of this, and I'm going to try to time it so that I know. Let's see here. GPS time. So I'm going to try to look at my GPS time here and write it at 11:54 local time. Click. Started recording right at 11:54 universal time, or 11:54 local time. That is 3:54 universal time for my records. So now I can take these images that it's recording right now and astrometrically solve the images to get the coordinates of the Solar Dynamics Observatory, and then use that data to calculate the orbit myself. And then the fun thing is, with that program I released, we can feed that back into the program and generate a prediction of that double solar eclipse seen by the Solar Dynamics Observatory using my own data from the telescope being collected right now. That should be possible. The only challenge is going to be, and it is a bit of a challenge, there's a lot of noise in these images. That might make for some hard work in terms of trying to astrometrically solve them. So Sean Carroll asks, what does the SDO analyze aside from what SOHO collects? SDO is like a next generation solar observatory compared to SOHO. SOHO is ancient. And SDO has much higher resolution, extreme UV cameras on it, and it's also capable of a much higher cadence. It takes pictures with a much faster rate. So it allows solar scientists to study phenomena that are more transient and in finer detail over time. It also has a lot more resolution on those imagers than the equivalent imagers on SOHO. So in some ways, I guess you could say it's redundant, but it's not really redundant. It is an evolution in solar observing. And because it is in this geosynchronous orbit, it's not geostationary, so you do have to track it actively. But it is geosynchronous, so it completes one orbit in a day. And as a result of that, it stays pretty much overhead doing this sort of, if you traced it out on the ground, it does a figure 8, because it has inclination and a little bit of eccentricity. And so it traces out this sort of racetrack figure 8 on Earth's surface in terms of the ground track, but it stays overhead of white sands, and they're able to get a constant downlink from the spacecraft, and so they're able to continuously get images from it. Of course, it can pass into Earth's shadow. Oh, what happened there? What happened there? What happened there? Something went wonky with the tracking. So I didn't touch it. I didn't do it. Computer must have hiccuped. It's getting back now. It's returning to where it was. But anyway, so they have an ability to constantly get images from it much faster than SOHO, which is in a Lagrange point, and so there's a much lower bandwidth available to that spacecraft. It requires a bigger dish to get the same bandwidth to SOHO that they get from SDO. That's basically it in a nutshell. Well, thanks for watching, Mr. Unite. I hope you have a nice evening. And so, yeah, the stars are the streaks going through the images. If I shut off the drive right now, it wouldn't move very fast. SDO would gradually leave the view. It would start to streak a bit, but it wouldn't be as fast as the stars necessarily, because it does complete one orbit in one day. But because it's not orbiting on the equator, it's not geostationary. To be geostationary, a satellite has to have 0 degrees inclination. It has to be orbiting at the equator so that you don't have to move your antenna to track the satellite, because it's orbiting on the equator. If it's got inclination to it, it's traveling north and south, and so you have to actively track it, even if the orbital period is equal to 1 day. Have I ever seen a UFO in the sky? Well, I've seen things I couldn't immediately identify. I saw what I believe is probably just a bundle of balloons floating in front of the sun during just before a solar eclipse a couple years ago. It's actually on my channel because I was live streaming it at the time, and it took me off guard. I didn't know what I was looking at. It looked like this shape-shifting object traveling in front of the sun, and I followed it across the sun. So that's actually footage on my channel. Was it aliens? I don't know. I don't think it's likely. I think the more likely explanation is something local. Other people watching that eclipse, other observatories, didn't see anything in front of the sun at that time, so it definitely wasn't something out in space near the sun. But whether it was balloons or something more exotic, I can't be 100% sure. There was an island. I was looking out over a bay, and there was an island on the opposite side of that bay. So it's entirely possible somebody was having a party out there right before sunset and let off some balloons. I can't verify that, I can't prove that, but it's plausible. And so I have to say, Occam's razor says most likely explanation: balloons. It's like that meme picture. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. It was definitely the aliens. It's not aliens until it's aliens. That's right, Sean. But I would love, for an alien mothership to come along right now and swallow up this satellite. Just swallow up the Solar Dynamics Observatory while we're watching. Just live for us all right here. That would be awesome. Let's get it on. see some alien action on the live stream. Watch YouTube tag that as duplicate content. Yeah, they probably would, because I've tracked SDO before. Uh-oh. It's duplication. He's doing it again. Oh, you gotta love it. Yeah, they also don't like long videos of ambiance, which I think this could fall under that heading. Check your tracking question. I'm sorry, I'll check your tracking question. What are the fastest objects and slowest objects for tracking? That's a good question. The slowest ones are actually harder for the scope to track than the faster ones. It seems counterintuitive. But see, this scope's old. This scope's real old. This scope was built before most people had the internet. It was designed and originally came out in the 90s. And even back then, you know, fastest we had was dial-up usually. And so they didn't count on people having internet access. They didn't count on people being able to update their telescopes. It wasn't designed with that in mind. The memory chips on this thing are pretty much permanent. They're EEPROM chips. To erase them and reprogram them, you have to expose them to intense UV light. You have to physically access the chips and remove them from the motherboard. And with that, you can zero out the chips if you expose them to intense UV light. Which, by the way, just a warning for anyone with an LX200, not a good idea to send it through airport security, because the X-rays they use can also have an effect. It's not as clean as exposing it to UV light, but it can cause some bits to get erased. So, not a good idea to ever transport your telescope, your LX200 in particular, by air travel or anything else where it's going to get X-rayed. Just a warning. But aside from that, it really can't be altered. So there's no way to update the software on this thing. And the software was designed with certain limitations. The formatting of the coordinates that I feed the scope, it's pretty coarse. You can only specify to the nearest second of arc. It can't do decimal points in terms of fractions of an arc second. So when you have a really slow moving object, it moves very jittery. It moves in discrete steps, and that's not really what you want when you want continuous tracking like this. Now, fortunately, with even geostationary satellites, the stars you can see them streaking by there. They're moving enough relative. The object is moving relative to the celestial sphere enough that you really don't notice the jitter as much. The faster the object, the better in a way, because you no longer get the jitter. It's moving fast enough that you don't need decimal points. The coordinates are changing continuously at a high rate of speed. So fastest object that I can track really are probably rocket launches, maybe ISS. When ISS gets close to the zenith, if I'm in alt-az tracking, so it's tracking relative to the horizon, up, down, left, and right. If it gets close to straight up, it's basically at that point not possible for the scope to keep up. because the scope has to spin around 180 degrees to start tracking on the opposite side of the sky, and at that point it's moving full speed to try to keep up. Terms of slowest, probably near-Earth asteroids, some of them, if they aren't that close to Earth and they're not traveling that fast, then they're slow enough that it's really jittery in terms of the tracking. It really kind of stutters along. Even, what was that one we just tracked? 2018 RC. You can see it. If you look in the time lapse, it looks like each star is sort of a pea pod with little varicosities, little variations in thickness where it kind of undulates like a pea pod. I don't know. It has these discrete points in it where the star is a little thicker. That's because of that. That's because of the limitation of the coordinates I can feed the telescope. And so it sort of jitters along a little bit as it's tracking that asteroid. Because that asteroid, although it seemed to be moving pretty good, those were 15-second exposures, and the stars were about as streaked as they are here. These are, what am I at right now? I'm at what? A second? Oh no, I'm at like, sorry, I'm at like 4 seconds or something on these exposures. But still, they're about as streaked as they were in those 15-second exposures. With the asteroid. So SDO is actually, relative to the stars, moving faster than that asteroid in terms of its angular speed. So it's actually easier to track in terms of getting a nice clear image. You see somebody talking about Dr. Simshuk, whatever his name is, made up character. Oh man, don't even get me started about what's his name. Made up this physicist, claims the world is ending, claims Nibiru is coming to claim us all. I mentioned him in a video I did recently about the length of the lunar eclipses, the total lunar eclipse. I started off that video talking about that because there was an article that came out, one of these British tabloids, I forget which one, specifically naming a real astronomer and claiming that there was a cover-up regarding what he believed with regard to Nibiru, claiming that he was actually a Nibiru believer and then he died, and his daughter fought to cover it up, which was a complete lie, complete fabrication. The thing is, he actually did have a daughter, and she actually is an astronomer. So that much was real, but what they said about her was not real. Probably not a good idea to publish that if you're a newspaper. Probably not a good idea. So anyway, she's aware of it now, and she actually wrote me back and thanked me for informing her, and there's a whole statement that I read out from her about that incident. And so this Dr. Simshuk guy, whoever it is who's actually creating that character, it's one thing to make up a fake astronomer and tell everyone the world is ending. I mean, tabloids do that kind of stuff all the time, I guess, but when you start using real people's names because you're not getting any traction, so you have to start trying to name real astronomers that if you Google it, there's actually, real credentials out there for that person, and you start lying about what they believed and what they said and defaming their family, you can get into some real legal trouble there. Real legal trouble. Probably not good to do that. So, anyway. I don't think it was the Daily Fail. It usually is, but I don't think in that case it was. Maybe they did an article about it. I think the one I'm thinking of anyway, I think it was, I don't want to say it and be wrong. It was one of the other ones, I'm pretty sure. How do I react to the sunspot video that just came out with up and down alternating objects? Oh, you're talking about the SDO. it is actually the same object, surprisingly enough. You can go check it out. I think it's the latest video on my channel before this one. Here, I'll post a link in the chat. It is the moon exhibiting retrograde motion during the eclipse, which causes it to appear to reverse course and go over the sun a second time. And that's due to SDO's orbit, which we're looking at right now, the Solar Dynamics Observatory. And so if you take the orbit and you calculate where the moon should have been relative to the sun at that time, guess what? The moon should have gone over the sun twice, and it should have been exactly that size. Yeah, the size changed over the course of the eclipse from one transit to the other, because the distance between the moon and the spacecraft was changing. And so it was bigger the first time and smaller the second pass, slightly. And so I wrote a program for annotating the SDO images automatically. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty clever. It uses OCR, optical character recognition, to identify the date and timestamp at the bottom. Well, I know where the date and timestamp is going to be in the image, so I kind of cheat. I cut out that part of the image based on the pixel coordinates of where that date timestamp is going to be. Feed that into Tesseract, which is character recognition software. And then when it spits out the date and time, feed that into the orbital calculation for calculating where the moon and sun should be as seen from SDO, which we're looking at right now. And then use that data to generate circles representing the sun and moon, and overlay that on top of the original video frames. Save it as a new video. Boom. Suddenly you have annotated video from SDO. And you didn't even have to look at the metadata of the file, which is kind of cool, because sometimes if it gets re-uploaded, the metadata can get stripped, but as long as those date timestamps are still there, you can still use it. It's designed to work with the 1024 by 1024 video right now. I could, if I wanted to make it a little more clever, I could have it look at what the original video size was and rescale the pixels based on that if it needs to. At the moment, though, it just assumes you're feeding it the 1024 by 1024 video, because that was easy. But anyway, so go check that video out. I released the source code on GitHub. So Sean Carroll asks, question regarding the SDO in that respect. The last time was about 6 years ago. Oh, yeah, the last time it did a double solar eclipse. I want to say there was another one. There was one in 2011, in I think March of 2011, and I predicted it in December of 2010. I saw it coming on Celestia, so I put up a video showing what would happen, and then it did. And that was the first time I think that ever happened for SDO, which had only launched in 2010. And I thought that was pretty good to be able to predict that ahead of time, because I knew people would think that's unusual, people would think that's impossible. And so at the time, I didn't know how to do programming with Python, and the only answer was to really use existing software like Celestia. And yeah, you could have done it after the fact, said, look, this is normal. But of course people say, but how do you know? I mean, how do you know they didn't add that into the software secretly to try to explain it as normal? Whatever. If you upload it ahead of time, before it's ever happened, and you predicted it, and it does happen accurately, well, that's bulletproof. So that's what I did. And then I want to say it happened one other time. I can't remember when. I'm thinking, though, it did happen again, and I wasn't really paying attention when it did. And I don't think it got all that much attention, but because of the closure now of the Sunspot Observatory in New Mexico, which is not the only solar observatory in the world, I should point out, or even in the U.S., there's others as well that haven't been shut down. But because of that, timed with this double eclipse on SDO, I think it's caught extra attention this time. And to be fair, I didn't pay attention to it this time. I didn't generate a prediction of it beforehand. Because at this point, I feel like I don't really have to do that every single time it happens, because I did it the first time, and isn't that kind of more meaningful, I guess? But now I've got this software where it can automatically annotate it. I'm kind of thinking if I had a computer to throw at the problem, which I really don't have one laying around that I could just throw at that problem, but It'd be kind of fun to have a bot running constantly that just downloads the SDO images and annotates them, and then puts them back up on a YouTube channel and just does that automatically. It ought to be possible to do that. Actually, the program I've already released, it's not too far from being able to do that. You just have to get it to automatically refresh the orbital elements once in a while. And if I had nothing else to do with my life, I could just track SDO every week like this and update the orbital elements myself and generate the predictions completely independent of NASA. Generate annotated images completely independent of NASA. Which sounds really cool and awesome and everything, but I don't have that kind of time to do this every week where I just track SDO for a few hours so I can, update the orbit on some bot that's running 24/7. All just to prove a point, and it's not worth that level of effort. So anyway, that's why I've released this software, so I don't have to do that. I can just, when something like this comes up, pull up the orbit, feed it into the program, and there you go. SDO, Solar Dynamics Observatory. So, Phantasm asks, so what is up with the solar station being quarantined that no one knows about? Do we have a super flare? Well, if we had a super flare, we would already have known about it. The observatory in question has been closed 9 days now. Any sort of major CME would have reached Earth by now, if that were the case. It is a true mystery as to why it closed. I haven't heard the reason really given yet. And there's multiple possible explanations for that. And from what I've heard, it sounds like even the director of the observatory isn't being kept fully in the loop on what's going on, other than to say it's a security issue. That could mean a lot of things. That could mean disgruntled employee, former employee, and that there is a real possibility it could be related to that, I think, because my understanding is the Sunspot Observatory, they've got some nice solar telescopes and everything. They used to be managed by the National Science Foundation, I think, or something, or National Solar Observatory or something. It used to be federally managed, okay? And then that is ending. They're building a newer, bigger, better telescope in Hawaii for doing observations. They still want observations from the current telescopes in New Mexico, but that's being handed off to New Mexico State University, NMSU. And so it's in this transition period right now. So my understanding is the people who used to run it are kind of down to a skeleton crew at this point. So maybe somebody got downsized, let go, and is disgruntled and wants to seek revenge on the people who still are there. I don't know. It's one possibility. Other possibilities, I mean, I've heard all kinds of crazy stuff, like China hacked them, and they're using their antennas there to listen in on White Sands missile range. White Sands isn't too far from that facility, and you can see the launches from White Sands at the top of that mountain. I was at White Sands just a couple weeks ago. It was a neat little place. Very, very old buildings. Von Braun used to go out there a lot when they were developing some of those early rockets. He used to fly out to White Sands during the early space race era. And I swear, a lot of those buildings at White Sands still look like they haven't seen a update since Von Braun was there. I mean, they look like they're still out of that era. So, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that we don't give better facilities to our soldiers. I mean, yeah. Anyway, that being neither here nor there, the Sunspot Observatory closure could be related to some sort of spying, whether that's somebody who was there or somebody hacking into the place. I don't know. I even considered and looked into possibilities that something classified transited the sun. You can get solar transits, which are interesting to watch. You can see the space station pass over the sun occasionally. If you've got a safe solar filter, and by all means, don't try this at home unless you know what you're doing. Dear Lord, you could blind yourself if you point a telescope at the sun. But if you know what you're doing and you have a safe solar filter that goes over the aperture of the telescope and protects the camera, you can see the space station pass over the sun. You can see it silhouetted against the sun. And some enterprising amateurs have even done more than that. Seen the space shuttle pass over the sun, seen the Hubble Space Telescope pass over the sun while the space shuttle was near it for the last servicing mission. There's a very famous photo out there of that. And so if you have a really big solar observatory with really big, powerful solar telescopes, I would imagine that they could also see those things. And occasionally, classified satellites will transit the sun. And so I wrote a program that can also do that, generate predictions of transits. And you can run any TLE file through it. That's a 3-line element file it can actually stand for 2-line elements as well, but in fact that's usually what they refer to it as. But really, usually you feed it in a 3-line format where the first line is the name of the satellite, the second and third lines are the orbital elements of the satellite. It'll run through those files and it'll predict which of the satellites are going to transit the sun and when. And sure, the government's not going to tell you where the classified ones are, but the amateurs know, because we track these things, just like I'm doing right now. And you can track classified satellites, and they do publish the orbits. They're out there. They're online. And you can run that classified file. There's a guy who maintains a list of basically all the classified satellites that amateurs know of, and you can run that file through there and see which ones are going to transit and when. I ran that through there. Nothing really stood out. There's a whole lot of transits of NOS satellites, these naval satellites. I think they're designed to look for submarines or something, and they fly in formation. Usually, there's 2 or 3 of them in formation. But nothing really, funny stood out to me. Like the X-37B, everyone loves to talk about that one. The secret space shuttle, that's in the file too. But that one's not supposed to transit the sun right now, according to its current orbit, which has been tracked by amateurs fairly recently. There's also been some odd activity of some Russian satellites, which is kind of interesting, and this has made the news a bit, where certain Russian satellites have been maneuvering in interesting ways with each other, and they seem to be doing close inspection sort of practice, where they can fly up to each other, maybe to practice sabotaging a foreign nation satellite, or just observing it, or performing maintenance, who knows what. Some of the satellites appear to deploy from others, and some of the satellites appear to maneuver to those deployed satellites, almost like they're hunting decoys or something in orbit. And so there's like 3 or 4 satellites involved in that stuff, and it kind of made the news, and when it did, of course, the news sort of mangled it a bit. It was a bit like one of those telephone games. The message gets really mangled by the time it gets to you. And so by the time it made it to the news stories, it started to sound like the Russians were potentially acting aggressive towards our satellites, which I haven't really seen evidence of that. But what I have seen is evidence that they've been practicing operations where they are maneuvering to each other. And no one really knows why. No one really knows what they're doing exactly. And so, if something like that were observed, if, hypothetically, a couple of these maneuvering satellites, Russian satellites, happened to pass over the sun and this observatory saw them, I'm sure the military would love to get that data. Would that require shutting it down for a week? I don't think so. So I don't know. It is an interesting mystery. And in fact, one of the news stories I read about it, the director of the observatory sounded like he's hoping that when this is all over, that it boosts tourism to this observatory. It's weird. I'm hearing something in the distance. It sounds a bit like fireworks. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fireworks. Anyway, so there was one guy who walked through the abandoned facility, or at least through the outside of the abandoned facility. It's this compound area. And he uploaded a video of him touring this place, because they don't really have it blocked off all that well. They've just got apparently police tape around it.
So he ducked under there and walked through it. And as he's walking through, one of the things he saw was in one of these buildings at this observatory compound. He looks in the door because it's kind of got this glass window thing, and sitting on top of the trash can is this X-Files DVD or CD, and it turns out it's from this X-Files computer game from like the 90s. It's just sitting there, almost like somebody was trying to display it like a joke. I don't know. It's kind of funny, or maybe they were sending a message. I don't know. But yeah, nobody really seems to know what's going on over there. Have I ever read The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe? I think I did in high school. I want to say I did. It's been a long time. Have any book recommendations? Sure. Let's see. Probably... Well... Yeah. I'm trying to think of what I would recommend as, like... If I had one book I could recommend, a space-related book. Yeah, it's a pretty good one. I'd say Falling to Earth is a pretty good one. Falling to Earth is a book written by Al Worden of his experiences. He was a command module pilot for Apollo 15. And there was some controversy surrounding that mission afterwards in terms of some of the items the astronauts brought with them. So it's really interesting for me, anyway, to read that and see his perspective of what happened. And... yeah, I mean, if you ever get to meet him, he's a really good guy. Gives a really good talk, too, about his mission and about the future of spaceflight. There's a lot of good books out there, so it's hard to recommend just one. That's just one I can think of. I also enjoyed... man, I should know what I think it's called Skywalking by Tom Jones. I'm going to say Skywalking. Is it Skywalking? Or Skywalker? No, it's not Skywalker. Tom Jones... Yeah, Skywalking by Tom Jones gives you a pretty good perspective of what it was like in the shuttle era, and he did some spacewalks, so interesting to hear about all of that. So yeah. Trying to think what else would be a good recommendation. I don't know. I've read a lot of in terms of amateur astronomy stuff. I've read a lot of Patrick Moore series books on astrophotography, astronomy, telescopes. They're all good information, but pretty basic. Nothing you can't find online. Just remember 42, yeah. Yeah, if you're looking for more entertainment type stuff, then Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is good. And also the original radio play is really good, too. It's on YouTube, I think, if you search for it. Can I zoom in on Olympus Mons at Tharsis Ridge? I wish I had the power to do that. I'd need a bigger scope, really, to see Olympus clearly. If you get a much bigger amateur scope than what I've got, then you can do it. But I'm just happy I get to see some detail on Mars. I mean, I think we had a pretty good image tonight. But even with that, you can't really see Olympus Mons, or even the Mariner Valley is surprisingly difficult to see. Hey, Jared. Good to see you. We're just looking at the Solar Dynamics Observatory right now. Sagittarius A, well, we can point in that direction. You're not going to see the black hole. Maybe if I had a big radio telescope, we could listen to it. That'd be kind of cool. But I don't have one of those. Radio Play Trillium was in the movie in the bar scene. Really? I didn't know that. Sirius. I can do Sirius. Yeah. Not right now. It's not up for me right now, but I could do that. Oh, you're on there playing Elite Dangerous. I do love Elite Dangerous because Elite Dangerous is a computer game, space simulator. Well, simulator might be a stretch, but space flight game set in the real galaxy, where real stars are represented at their real distances in the game, and so you can travel faster than light. You can jump from star to star, sort of, but they're in their correct places, as it were. There's also randomly generated stars to sort of flesh things out, but the major ones are all there. So if you go to Earth in the game and you look up at the sky, you'll see the stars, but those are actually rendered because they are in the game, and you can go to them. So you can go to Sirius, you can go to Arcturus, and so forth. Reading Cosmos and the Right Stuff. Those are good classic books. There was one I read. It was a biography of John Glenn. I forget the name of it. It was good. I wish I could be more help there. Don't recall the name of it. But it was specifically about John Glenn's military experience and his spaceflight experience. It didn't include his flight on, I think it was Discovery. It was one of the space shuttles. But it was a really good biography about his early life military experience leading up to Mercury. Yeah, Elite Dangerous has, I hesitate to even say mostly accurate physics, but accurate-ish physics. To make it a game, they limit your speed when you're not traveling faster than light. They limit your speed and going from station, or flying around stations and being in combat and stuff. They limit you to basically Mach 1 or thereabouts to make it easier as a game, but you can turn off sort of the inertial assistance mode and fly in one direction and flip around the opposite direction and shoot your guns that way, that kind of stuff. The cool thing to me about it is that they represent the galaxy in its true scale. And so even though you can jump 20 light years in, 5 seconds, it actually takes a long time to get places. It feels like it takes a long time. I mean, people in the game who got more time on their hands than I have and more dedication have made it all the way across the galaxy and back, but it takes a serious effort to do that. And it gives you a good sense of how vast the galaxy is when you can snap your fingers and travel 20 light years, and yet you still feel like you're struggling to make any progress getting somewhere. You get to realize how far away these objects are, and even some of the deep space objects are represented in the game. The Pleiades is in the game, and it's actually a very important region in the story, the plot of the game. And it, if you get just a little starter ship and you can only jump a few light years at a time, it takes a while to get there. So it's fun and slightly educational because it helps you understand how far away these objects are. Yeah, 30 minutes to get to some bases from the sun. So yeah, each time you jump in the game, you start out at the position of the sun, or the biggest star in the system if it's a multi-star system. And then you have to travel, even traveling faster than light. I forget what the maximum speed is if you're traveling within a system, but you'll easily be going 20, 30, and even 100, 200 times the speed of light. But if there's a station way out in the Kuiper belt of the system, or somewhere in the equivalent distance, it takes a long time to get there. And if you have to go 1,000 AU, go get a sandwich, you're going to be there a while. And I think they've even gone to the effort with some of the major exoplanet discoveries of putting those exoplanets into the game. Or I think there's one case I saw where there was already a star near the location of this star that had been found to have a certain exoplanet configuration, and so I think they might have just renamed an existing star in the game to that star to match. But it's nice that you can tell the designers of the game like Astronomy love staying current with astronomy news and update the game as things are discovered. So, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can download some data for maybe some DirecTV sats or something. Yeah, they have planetary landings in Elite Dangerous as well, but only for airless worlds and airless moons and worlds that don't have an atmosphere. Keep waiting for them to patch to the point that you can land on planets that have atmospheres and everything. That would be really cool, but I don't know that that's ever going to come. Bulk catalog downloads. Let's see here. Each dot on this screen is not a galaxy. The streaks are stars. The dots are mostly hot pixels, except for the bright white one in the middle. That is the satellite that we're tracking, Solar Dynamics Observatory. Let's see, geosynchronous. Yeah, let's get those guys. At this time of night, it's after midnight here, low Earth orbit satellites are unfortunately going to be in Earth's shadow, so we can't see them. But higher altitude satellites, like geostationary satellites, are still visible, still in the sunlight. Though, you know what would be fun? I know just the thing. Oh, I just had an interesting idea. Yeah, that will work. I think I have an idea. Let's call this sat 91618. Okay. So I saved some orbital elements for geostationary satellites. What I'm going to try to do, we are entering eclipse season for geostationary satellites. Geosynchronous satellites like SDO, because of their inclination, they can have different eclipse seasons than geostationaries. But what I'm going to try to do here is find some satellites that are on the verge of going into or coming out of Earth's shadow. So, let's see here. This is another thing Sky Safari Pro is handy for, because it will show me where Earth's shadow is in the sky, and consequently which satellites are about to go into or come out of that shadow. RSAT 2. You are... Yeah. Okay, what? You are just a few minutes from going into that shadow. It's fairly dim, though. Don't know if we can get it or not. Maybe. Alright, let's try it. So I'm going to stop tracking SDO here. Stop recording the SDO video. Stop tracking. Okay, stop the tracking on SDO. So now the stars will become solid and SDO will streak out of the view. So now SDO is a streak. See it there? It's moving to the left and down. And now you can see the stars have gone from streaks to being solid dots as SDO leaves the view. Cool beans. Now I'm going to load up a geostationary satellite file. And we find that satellite I was looking at, which is just a few minutes away from going into Earth's shadow, because you can get some interesting flaring when that happens. So, satellite tracker program here thinks it's eclipsed. I don't think it's quite eclipsed yet. Let's go there. Okay. We're there, but I don't really see it. Oh wait, maybe that's it? Is that it there? That bright one down in the bottom right? Let's stop tracking and see if it starts streaking. No. No. Okay, so that's just a hot pixel. That's how you tell. Nimic 4, let's go for you. Thinks that's already eclipsed too. XM3. XM radio? Is that what that is? I think that's what that is. Yeah, and AMC's there. XM3 rhythm. Okay. Let's do you. Yep. Because it'll be heading into Earth's shadow too in a little while. Yep, okay, so we've got 3 satellites here. The far left one is AMC 16. The middle one is XM3 rhythm. And then on its right is XM5. So I think that's XM radio. So if you listen to XM radio, here's a couple of satellites that are providing that. And we can go ahead and adjust this. Get these satellites a little more centered up here. So I'm going to streak everything here for a moment while I center things up a little bit better. So we're going to track these for a while and hopefully watch them go into Earth's shadow. Looks like that should happen right around 1 a.m. thereabouts, give or take a few minutes. It should happen around 1 a.m. In about 15 minutes. So that'll be cool. We might end up seeing them actually flare up in brightness right before they go into the shadow, because what happens is, from the telescope's perspective, they're directly opposite the sun in the sky. And so you're getting this bright glint of sunlight reflecting off the solar panels right as they go into Earth's shadow. And then the Earth is blocking them from seeing the sun. Yeah, so these are geostationary satellites. They can be clustered fairly close together because geostationary slots are valuable, and for obvious reasons, because you don't need a tracking telescope like this one to watch these things. I could shut off the drive right now, and they would continue to be in the same spot. So they try to get the maximum usage out of those geostationary slots. So I think the AMC satellite is also a very important satellite. I'm going to try to see here, what is that exactly? What does it do? According to Gunter's space page, they are both leased to EchoStar, built by Lockheed Martin. And AMC 16 there on the left was launched from Slick 41 at Cape Canaveral in 2004 on an Atlas V in the 521 configuration. Oh, I heard the telescope adjust itself just now. Yeah, it had a little hiccup there, probably with the laptop. How far apart are those three satellites? That's a good question. I would have to do the math on that. Let's see here. So, what's the range? What's the distance? Okay, I need to write this down. Notepad. Range is 366. This is slant range from the telescope. 36614 kilometers. And then the angular separation from the middle satellite is 0.1131 degrees. So in angular size, that is what? Physical size, rather. We have the angular size there. That's 0.1131. Distance 36614 kilometers. That is 72 kilometers. So, and it looks like they're pretty evenly spaced, so it's about 70 kilometers between each of them from one to the other. And my phone is dying, so I need to go grab my backup battery. I will be right back. You guys let me know if you see any UFOs. Yeah, the telescope just hiccuped there. I am half tempted to shut off the drive to keep it from hiccuping like that. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm crazy. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna shut off the drives. This will officially be the last object of the night, but it's worth it. Drives are off. Stop tracking, disconnect. Not that you're talking to anything anyway at this point. So I just shut off the telescope. It is powered off. So those objects should remain in view because they are geostationary. Pretty cool, huh? All right. All good here. I'm back now. I'm assuming there were no alien motherships swooping through the view while I was gone. I just missed the multi-UFO peace sign? Oh my goodness. Well, at least they don't mean to eat us. Well, thanks for watching, Sam. I appreciate it. Hope you have a nice night. I'm probably going to retire myself as soon as we're done watching these satellites go into Earth's shadow. Thanks for watching, duh. Have a good night. Probably got about 5 or 10 minutes left until these satellites go into Earth's shadow. Well, thank you, Sean, and I apologize for suddenly thrusting you in the role of my deputy with no warning there, but I needed a second pair of eyes helping with the banhammer tonight because of certain individuals. So thank you for assuming that role, and you did a great job. Appreciate it. Pioneer satellites would definitely be too far out from my telescope to see. So are Voyagers. But some very intrepid amateurs, I believe in Germany, actually picked up a signal from the Voyager satellite, our probe. A few years back, they used a large dish that a collaboration of them use and own in Germany, I think, and tuned it to Voyager and picked up a signal, which is mighty impressive, considering it's over 100 astronomical units away. Is that Comet Hulk a hoax? Comet Hulk? I'm not familiar with the Comet Hulk. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how flat earthers would explain these satellites that, like I said, I've shut the telescope off. It's not even powered on right now. It's not moving. And there are 3 satellites in formation hovering right above the telescope, and they're always there, 24 hours a day. How do they stay there without moving? Those aren't balloons. They're not moving. They're not drifting around in the wind or anything. So So yeah, any minute now we should start to see them go into Earth's shadow, and it'll be interesting to me. I don't know how quickly... Well, you know, actually, I do know how quickly. In theory, if my thinking's right, the shadow should proceed as quickly as the stars are moving through the image, in terms of blinking them out. And I think I still have the image oriented right side up, in which case they should blink out from left to right in the image. Yeah, is it still a satellite when it's leaving the solar system? I don't think so. I mean, it's in a hyperbolic orbit, so I don't think you could really say it's a probe. At least that's the term I would give it. Is this the center of Orion? No. Orion's belt wouldn't even fit in the view. You can see one of the Orion belt stars at a time, but these are 3 satellites. So on the left we have AMC-16. In the middle we have XM, which one was it? XM3. And then on the right we have XM5. And there we go. AMC-16 on the left is going into Earth's shadow. It's fading out. And in a moment, the middle one will go into Earth's shadow and fade out. And then lastly, the one on the right, XM3 on the right. So XM5 in the middle is now going to Earth's shadow and fading out. And then on the right, XM3. If you listen to XM radio, these are 2 of the satellites providing that. And in a moment, XM3 on the right will go into Earth's shadow and fade out. And this is because we're currently near the equinox. These satellites, because they're geostationary, have to orbit on over the equator, and so they only pass into Earth's shadow near one of the equinox points, which we're currently near. So there you go. Now XM3 on the right is going into Earth's shadow and winking out. The stars are the streaks going through the view. So there we go. So long, XM satellites. And if we stayed up a lot later, well, I don't know. How much later? That's a question. Let me see. I'm just curious. Yeah, it would take a while. Looks like about 2 a.m. If I stayed up till 2 a.m. If I stayed up for another hour, almost exactly an hour, about an hour and 3 minutes from now, they'll come back out from Earth's shadow, but I'm not going to stay up for that. So thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream. We got to see some pretty cool stuff there. And stay tuned for more. Subscribe to Red's Rhetoric channel. I'm going to put that in the video description. I'll be doing live streams on his channel. I've done one for Asteroid 2018 RC, and I'll be doing more in the future. And thank you to the 2 people who donated tonight. It was very kind, and I will put your money to good use, making sure that this equipment keeps operating in the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Clear skies, folks.